You walk in here and you get a sense of history, you get a sense of where it all began, you get a sense of the men who came together to create our Constitution, who wrote our Declaration of Independence. And I use it constantly with visitors to sort of do that transformation of a couple of hundred years and take them back to our founding documents, because only by talking about these men and talking about what they did in the surroundings that would be familiar to them can I show them how we became what we became.
The diplomatic reception rooms in the U.S. Department of State are a suite of rooms used by the Secretary of State, members of the Cabinet, the Vice President, and other high government officials to entertain both foreign and American guests. Guests are entertained at luncheons, dinners, swearing-ins of American ambassadors abroad.
Congratulations, Madam Ambassador.
Award ceremonies, and on very special occasions at state luncheons.
Welcome to the State Department, the diplomatic rooms of the State Department. This is the part of the State Department that we are most proud of. As you enter in the ground floor, it's very sterile, it's very black floor and white solid vertical walls, and then you come up 8 floors to this wonderful diplomatic setting which reflects the way our country was about 225 or so years ago, and it's where we have very special occasions.
And they feel now I'm here as part of the history of what's going on. And maybe if we do things right, they'll hang a picture up here someday, and 200 years from now somebody will point to it.
I think it's marvelous that there is this setting in which such ceremonies take place. This business of becoming a nation is an ongoing matter. We are constantly reassessing who we were and what we are and what our potentials are in the future. These objects are just part of that stream.
The great thing about this collection is that it's not just masterpieces of furniture, but the collection includes masterpieces of American silver, porcelain, fine arts, paintings, carved wood, so many different mediums besides furniture. And represented here are the greatest craftsmen that worked in America.
We very rarely use the word masterpiece. It's not a word you should overuse, I think. But fortunately, with the State Department collection, you can use the word a lot. You really can.
These are really the crown jewels of America.
Becoming a Nation, a traveling exhibition, gives us the opportunity to share with the American public some of the great treasures from this collection. The exhibition is divided into 5 thematic sections, the first section being a vision of America.
To introduce the visitor to the thematic organization of the exhibition, we chose some icons right at the first, the most important of which is obviously the Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington. I mean, that sort of set the stage.
In the collection are portraits of some of the great patriots who sacrificed so much to make America what it is today. George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, Monroe. It's so important for students, for young people to see these people and to learn about them. And you're looking at not just a book about that person, you're looking at an image painted during the time, a portrait of that person, which helps you to connect you to the past. And they're by some of the great artists.
I think one of the greatest masterpieces in the collection is the great signed Benjamin Frothingham Bombay or kettle base desk and bookcase.
I love that piece.
Isn't that great?
Oh, fabulous.
To me, it's the epitome of a great masterpiece of American furniture. It has that S-shaped curve that William Hogarth talked about as the great line of beauty. He said it leads the eye on a wanton chase. It's just a sinuous line that starts at the base and curves up, and that beautiful bonnet. And actually in the 18th century, this would have been the center of a household. It would have been literally like a working Filofax, Rolodex, Palm Pilot. It would have kept all the papers, organized the papers of the house, probably kept files and documents inside, possibly stored valuables, money or gold or whatever, with its locked lids.
It would have been the centerpiece in the room, of course, right? A real center of tension in the house, right?
Exactly, and it's just perfect proportions.
The Americans who owned these objects and the Americans who commissioned these objects did so because of their great sense of optimism and pride in America, their self-reliance. They did not, for the most part, order these things from abroad, but rather had them made here. And I think that these objects, the way they were made in a sturdy fashion, unornamented and yet very handsome, bold, very often very tall pieces, reflect the self-reliance, the enthusiasm, the optimism, and self-confidence of Americans during the colonial period.
Although it's really hard to pick a favorite, right? We've narrowed it down to 20, but if I had to narrow that down to one, I'd say that it's the tall case clock, the wonderful Newport tall case clock with this bonnet top, with this brass, pierced brass fretwork.
One of the things I love about tall case clocks, or grandfather's clocks as we call them, is that they're a lot like people. They have a waist, it has a base, it has little feet in the bottom, certainly has a bonnet, right? And a dial or a face.
And it has a ticker.
My favorite piece would have to be the great Edmund Townsend 3-shell block front knee-hole dressing table. Why? In about the 1750s or 60s, the Goddard Townsend family, they were Quakers on an island off of the coast of Rhode Island, created this furniture that had its own style. It was a restrained, beautiful elegance. And this piece has these beautiful shells, 3 across the frieze, 2 tiers of drawers, beautiful OG bracket feet with little volutes. It just springs to life. And it's just so gorgeous.
It's a masterpiece.
It's gorgeous. And it's a purely American style.
The chairs, and there are many chairs in the diplomatic reception room. There are many chairs. Some are upholstered with very elegant silk fabric. Some are more simply upholstered. Some simply have slip seats. And all of them were used and are used.
These are very famous chairs. They're not terribly comfortable, but they're impressive.
The Revolutionary War made Americans look at themselves, the world, and the objects which they possessed slightly differently. It was a time of great patriotism, and it is interesting to note that the objects that people were buying or not buying, perhaps even more importantly from England, reflected this very important period leading up to the Revolutionary War.
My favorite piece in the whole floor is the Jefferson desk. It's not clear what he actually used it for, but my story is that he used it to write the Declaration of Independence. I don't know how close to the truth that is, but it's a great story and I stick with it.
It was always an inkwell and an old quill there, and you could say to somebody, try your hand. But it's a way of saying, now here's Jefferson. He was one of the great men in our early days, and he was a Renaissance man. It wasn't just that he was a diplomat, and it wasn't that he was a president. He designed buildings, he designed furniture, he figured out how to make things work. He was a pragmatist. And so that tells you something about the nature of the people that founded our country.
We are very pleased to be able to show foreign visitors great examples of regional furniture. Among them, for example, the Philadelphia High Chest, which incorporates a lot of very typical Philadelphia Rococo features, including the cartouche, which is slightly forward. And this piece happens to also have a Philadelphia feature called the Philadelphia Peanut. This kind of furniture, these very elaborate pieces, were considered a status symbol in Philadelphia. We are now in the John Quincy Adams State Drawing Room. This room is the room in which the Secretary of State receives all of his guests. And it holds really some of the most important pieces in this collection. There are fine examples of American craftsmanship, both in paintings and in furniture.
That room really coheres when you look around, when you step into it. It's densely furnished with wonderful objects, and maybe that's why I like that room the best.
The federal era in the United States, when the United States formed its government as we know it today, was also a very important period in the decorative arts in the United States, the period of about 1790. This is a time when some of the most important pieces in this collection were made, and ones that very much reflect the spirit of independence and the federal era.
The common man is represented in all of this furniture, all of this silver, because it was the craftsman who made it. The silver urn, that is the first piece of presidential silver that we know of, that was made probably by Paul Revere for John Adams and his wife.
There's some great pieces made in New York by craftsmen such as Duncan Phyfe. There's a wonderful caned settee with carrule base and with wonderful carving on the crest rail. Just masterpieces, really, made in America at a time when America was a new republic.
If you begin to look at the details on those 5 pieces, you see that they've selected certain motifs that are expressive of the new United States. The ideas that promoted government of a United States are right there, bang, in the furniture.
America's sense of boundless opportunity and boundless resources was very much reflected in the expansion to the West. We are able to depict this expansion in many important scenes of the Far West painted by some of the great American artists.
Thomas Moran's great painting of the Green River in Wyoming with the great cliffs there, it's an inspiring painting. It's just beautiful to look at.
When these rooms first opened in 1961, they did not look at all as you see them today. The rooms were very sparsely furnished, and they varied a great deal from room to room. What you see today could never have been possible without the extraordinary vision of my predecessor, Clem Conger, the hard work of the Fine Arts Committee and the Diplomatic Rooms Endowment Fund, and most of all, the extraordinary generosity of the American people who have so generously contributed to these rooms. This collection has been put together completely by gift and by loan of private citizens. In addition, this project could never have been completed without the extraordinary support of each and every Secretary of State.
When I was Secretary, the Secretary's office hadn't been rebuilt yet. It was described by somebody like the boardroom of a medium-sized Midwestern bank. So I frequently took visitors upstairs and showed them a more artistic and historic side of America.
I was the first Secretary of State since Thomas Jefferson who liked construction jobs. When I heard that there was the possibility for a broad renovation of many of the rooms, what are now called the diplomatic reception rooms and the Secretary's offices, I was wholeheartedly in favor of it, even though I had to move out of my office for a while. So I thought when I heard the tap, tap, tap of the hammer, something was getting accomplished.
It is a big surprise to know that we have that kind of a wonderful collection of Americana in the State Department. So the big thing is, my goodness, there are these incredibly beautiful rooms inside this very plain building.
We hope the many visitors who come to the diplomatic reception rooms, either as honored guests or on public tours, as well as the visitors who view Becoming a Nation, will share with us the pride we have in these extraordinary objects which reflect our cultural heritage.
I'm privileged on behalf of the Kennedy Center and the President to give out honors to some of the most distinguished performers in American life, from the arts. And that's perhaps my favorite time up here. Kennedy Center honors when the room is absolutely sparkling. It doesn't get much better than that. I've been known to sing. I serenaded Chita Rivera right here in these diplomatic rooms with a song that she is well known for and to some sense captures America. I want to be in America. And that's what these rooms are all about, America, and people who want to be in America And it was the men who are represented in this room by furniture, by the pieces of their times, by their portraits, who created that America that the Chita Riveras and all the others who've come to these shores, to include my own parents, want to be in.